It is Friday, and you know what that means. Time to go over 10 more hidden indie gems that not nearly enough people have played. I'm BarelyMagicMike, subbing in for Old Gamer Joe this week, but just a reminder that we do a brand spanking new indie hidden gems list every Friday, so if you like this video and want to check out any you missed, take a look at our Indie Underdogs playlist to catch up on prior weeks and give that ever-growing backlog something to fear. And don't forget that if you love content like this and want to help support our mission to bring a voice to the voiceless, subscribe to the channel and check out our Patreon to get access to early and ad-free shows, our podcast 3 days early, a shout out at the end of each video, and much more. Alright, on to the list. I want to start out with a very recent release that, with only 34 reviews on Steam at the time of writing, has met surprisingly little fanfare despite the core concept being a twist on the ever-popular web game Wordle. This is Birdigo, a roguelike you could safely consider the spiritual offspring of Wordle and Balatro. While Balatro likes are about as ubiquitous these days as news of Taylor Swift's engagement, congrats to her and all, but I don't really care. What you should care about is that Birdigo takes the Balatro framework and runs with it, adding a really charming theme about bird migrations and enough twists to make it feel unique. Rather than joker cards that level up your hand, you'll have feathers to collect that might boost your power if you spell a word ending in ER, or give you extra flaps for every vowel you use. And trust me, you want as many flaps as you can get, because flaps times power equals distance. Obviously, did none of you take bird physics as part of your bird law curriculum? Charlie Kelly would be very disappointed. Let's keep rolling with the roguelikes for a minute as I introduce you to RollScape, an extremely unique dice rolling roguelike with majorly chill vibes and way more content than you'd expect for its meager $8 price tag. RollScape has been something of an obsession for me the last few weeks because despite its gameplay consisting of little more than hitting a button to roll a die, all of the strategic decision making around when to hit that button has burrowed its way into my brain like an extremely concerning parasite. Each time you roll a die in RollScape, the face value you get corresponds to the number of tiles that get placed in a linear path forward. Each of these tiles has a number on it, and these numbers get added up into points that are currency for upgrades. Upgrades run the gamut from adding a point to a face of your die to giving a 50% chance of adding a point to each tile of a specific type. And the further your run goes, the more you gain mid-run upgrades that can completely change the game. I suspect part of why RollScape hasn't caught up with a wider audience, its implicit mathiness aside, is that it's a lot easier to understand by playing it than by hearing it explained. But if you're even passively interested in a numerical roguelike with tons of creative content and a shockingly great soundtrack, RollScape should be on your radar. Next up, let's talk VR, which is a personally coveted gaming medium that we don't get around to covering a lot. Specifically, I want to talk about a very old game by VR standards that still seems yet to find a modern match in terms of the type of asymmetrical co-op fun it entails. VR The Diner Duo is a co-op game requiring only one VR headset, so don't go selling that kidney quite yet. It released on Steam back in 2016, so anybody who got a VR headset in recent years can hardly be blamed for not looking back far enough in Steam's catalog to notice this one. In VR The Diner Duo, you and a friend or spouse or nemesis can join forces to run a robot restaurant because robots apparently eat cheeseburgers and get really annoyed if you get the toppings wrong. One player will be in VR mode and play as the chef, needing to grab a number of ingredients as efficiently as possible to fulfill each order that gets placed. The other player will be on PC in flat screen mode and be the waiter, going around to take and fulfill orders. The twist is that the game itself doesn't communicate any information whatsoever between players. That's your job. As chef, you need to listen to your partner call out what an order is and make sure you're fulfilling it quickly as several other orders may come in at once. As waiter, you have to get customers drinks and make sure you're communicating the correct orders in enough time to not overwhelm the chef and also make sure the customers don't lose patience. It's frenetic, it's very fun, and there's a lot of yelling. The closest thing to compare it to would be a VR version of Overcooked, albeit with only 2 players max, and it's a shame to me that this title seemingly didn't sell enough for the developers to make another. If you're into some co-op VR shenanigans, this is among your best bets. Shifting back to flat screen mode now, have you ever played a Sonic game and thought to yourself, I really like playing as a super fast blue hedgehog, but what would be really cool is playing as one of the rings he collects? Of course you haven't, because not a single human has had that thought until the developers of Aureole The Wings of Hope came along, and it turns out that despite the name of the game sounding way too close to the word areola, platforming as a really fast ring is actually very fun. Levels are short, linear affairs designed to be moved through quickly with an addictive pace that makes you want to try just one more as the content continues to unlock. While the story arguably has way too much text to sift through and is, in my opinion, best skipped, the gameplay holds its own here and makes for a unique proposition that prioritizes technical movement and high speed above all else. Next on the list is another release I've been personally obsessed with. It may not look like much at first glance, but Tall Trails is one of the best games of 2025, and I'd like you to hear me out on that. At its core, this is a 3D platforming collectathon where movement focuses on strategic use of a boot strapped to your back, which can pick up objects from the ground up to 3 at a time and launch them downward to propel you up. While very simple in theory, Tall Trails takes a basic concept and builds on it tremendously by giving a unique variety of properties to objects you pick up. Sure, most things just launch you upward a bit, but you'll also pick up objects that let you glide or let you grapple around scenery like Spider-Man. This is your primary means of locomotion as well as running and jumping, but you can also climb literally anything, albeit in a way limited by a stamina meter that's basically ripped right out of Breath of the Wild, for better or worse. Not only is there a lot of content here for $10, including a sizable campaign and New Game Plus mode, but the story is surprisingly good, with really goofy, lovable characters and far more laugh-out-loud lines of dialogue than I would have expected. Essentially, what you get here is something like Little Gator Game meets Breath of the Wild's climbing and Frog Detective's humor, and I really hope more people are willing to give it a go. On its surface, my next pick, Star Drift Evolution, doesn't look like much either, with very basic geometry of its cars and levels, but if you can get past that rudimentary visual style, you'll find a very cool racer with tons of cars, an insane variety of tracks, and both split-screen and online multiplayer, which is something you pretty rarely see anymore. On top of that, it features a surprising variety of camera modes, including a fixed top-down perspective, helicopter view, standard third-person mode, and more. And while the extremely drifty controls no doubt take some getting used to, once everything clicks, it's hard to find many racers with quite as much to offer at this price point. Next up is NBB.exe, which I'm convinced should be part of a song, but is apparently the name of a game instead. If you ever wish for an indie platformer in the vein of Bomberman, NBB.exe has you covered, and often feels like Bomberman and Crash Bandicoot had a brightly neon-colored baby. The pace is fast, the challenge is intense, and it even supports local multiplayer if you're into that sort of thing. While most of the game's platforming takes place in smaller, bite-sized levels within its overworld, exploring that overworld is a sizable part of the game in and of itself. While I understand challenging 3D platformers may not be for everyone, NBB.exe having only 18 reviews on Steam at the time of writing is nothing short of criminal, and I want to see some arrests. Let's stick with platformers for now, but shift to a different perspective. Turbo Shell is a unique twist on a platformer that made literally no sense whatsoever to me at first until actually playing it. Rather than running and jumping like all of those other silly quote-unquote traditional platformers, Turbo Shell requires you to push based on the blue line you see in this footage and pull based on the red line toward and away from surfaces using your EPS or egg propulsion system. At first, it sort of feels like patting your head, rubbing your stomach, and bobbing for apples all at the same time, but the game does a respectable job of tutorializing its core mechanic in a way that allows you to gently acclimate before it feeds you to the wolves in later levels. The game is certainly tough, can get very fast, and yet just like NBB.exe has only 18 reviews on Steam at the moment after over 2 years on the store. And you know what? I only discovered this one recently myself despite it being exactly my kind of platformer, so I don't fault anybody for having trouble navigating the insane number of interesting games out there. If you're interested in giving Turbo Shell a shot though, it's on sale for just under $4 for a couple more days as of the time this video goes up. Alright, I'm cheating just a little bit with this next pick because as far as hidden gems go, I could certainly go more hidden than this one, but having now released 8 years ago, modern virtual reality fans may not even know that To The Top exists, and what a tremendous disservice to them that is. Despite its age, To The Top remains the absolute peak of what parkour in VR can feel like, which is why it's a huge shame that its planned sequel never quite managed to emerge. To the Top is a momentum-based parkour platformer where you'll bounce between a huge variety of obstacles as fast as possible while picking up collectibles on your way to the finish line. The pace here is so frenetic and the skill ceiling so high that even as someone who doesn't give the slightest of shits about beating time-based challenges, I was constantly replaying levels to see if I could get just a little bit faster. The game simply feels amazing to play and is backed by a surprisingly solid soundtrack that got stuck in my head all the time when I was playing it. There's certainly a little bit of jank given how early in VR's life cycle it released, but the fact that I've yet to play a better VR platformer since speaks volumes for the level of quality here. If you own a VR headset and aren't gonna vomit at the prospect of flinging your way across levels like a coked up acrobat, this should already be on your list. I can feel you're getting a little burnt out by the number of platformers on this list, so let's pivot to something completely different from my last pick. Isle of Maligree is a dark fantasy, choice-based visual novel with an interesting twist. You're an investigator sent to the titular island to find a missing person, but you're limited to solving the case in only a few days because after that, everybody seemingly forgets the victim even existed. Upon starting the game, you'll pick one of 3 fates, which more or less function as classes, and determine what skill points you want to allocate where, after which you'll immediately embark to the island. The visual style is hazy, dreary, and monochromatic, accompanied by a morose but elegant soundtrack that gives the game an appropriately dreadful vibe. While I've yet to play enough of Isle of Maligree myself to solve its mysteries, what I can say is that the atmosphere is on point, and the writing gives off a level of quality that can easily carry the intrigue the story wants to deliver. Anybody into choice-based visual novels would do themselves a service to give this one a go. That's it for this week, folks. I hope you found a hidden gem that speaks to you and makes you want to support the indie developers that work so hard to bring us unique, creative experiences. Everybody enjoy your weekends and keep it on I Dream of Indie Games for more hidden gems in the future, as well as the rest of the indie gaming coverage you've grown to know and love.